Elon Musk wasn't someone you'd expect to dive headfirst into a political scandal. Sure, he was known for his bold moves, launching rockets into space, building electric cars that changed the auto industry, and even buying Twitter to shake things up online. But politics? That wasn't really his thing. At least not until something strange caught his eye. It all started in early 2024 when Musk was going through some boring financial documents tied to one of his company's lobbying efforts. You know how sometimes you're looking for one thing and end up finding something completely unexpected? That's exactly what happened here. Buried deep in those papers, he stumbled across something odd, a series of payments that didn't add up. They were linked to Hillary Clinton's activities after her time as Secretary of State. Now, Musk isn't the kind of guy who ignores details. If anything, he's obsessed with them. So instead of brushing it off, he decided to dig deeper. What he found made him sit up straight. There were connections between these payments and big corporations, foreign governments, and shadowy organizations. It looked like there was more to this story than met the eye. At first, Musk hesitated. He knew getting involved in politics could open a can of worms. People already loved or hated him for his business decisions and outspoken nature on social media. Why stir the pot further? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized this wasn't just about politics, it was about fairness. Corruption bugged him, whether it happened in Washington or Silicon Valley. And if he had evidence of wrongdoing, shouldn't he do something about it? So, quietly and carefully, Musk put together a small team of trusted people to help him investigate. These weren't random hires, they were experts in data analysis, finance, and investigative journalism. He kept everything under wraps because he knew how explosive this could become. Leaks could ruin the investigation before it even got off the ground. This wasn't just another project for Musk. It felt personal, like he was standing at the edge of uncovering something huge. As the weeks went by, the team started piecing things together. They combed through federal lobbying disclosures, campaign finance reports, and offshore banking transactions. It was tedious work, but slowly, patterns began to emerge. Payments from multinational corporations flowed into accounts, tied to events organized by the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI. On paper, these looked like donations for charity, but the numbers didn't match up. Millions of dollars seemed to vanish without explanation. The deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Some of the money came from shell companies registered in places like Panama and the Cayman Islands, tax havens notorious for hiding wealth. It raised questions. Who was behind these companies? Why were they funneling cash into CGI events? And most importantly, where did the money go afterward? Word eventually leaked out that Musk was sniffing around this scandal. Predictably, critics dismissed it as another publicity stunt. Of course, Elon Musk would try to make headlines, they said. He loves drama. Supporters, however, saw it differently. To them, this was proof that Musk wasn't afraid to take on powerful people no matter how risky it might be. But here's the thing about Musk. He doesn't care much what others think. Once he sets his mind on something, he goes full steam ahead. And this time, he had a gut feeling that what he was uncovering was bigger than himself. Bigger than politics. It was about exposing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made people feel. Still, the pressure mounted. Politicians on both sides weighed in. Democrats accused him of targeting their party leader unfairly, while some Republicans worried his investigation might overshadow their own plans to criticize Clinton. Meanwhile, ordinary people couldn't stop talking about it. Was Musk onto something real, or was this just another wild conspiracy theory? For now, Musk stayed silent, letting his team gather more evidence. He knew the stakes were high. If he went public too soon, he risked being dismissed as reckless. But if he waited too long, the trail could go cold. Timing was everything. And so the world watched and waited, unsure of what would happen next. One thing was certain, though. Whatever Musk uncovered, it would change the game. For better or worse, he was about to step into territory few dared to tread, and drag everyone else along for the ride. Once Elon Musk and his team started digging deeper, They realized they weren't just chasing shadows, there was a real story here. It wasn't easy, though. Uncovering the truth meant sifting through mountains of documents, cross-referencing names, dates, and numbers, and connecting dots that seemed invisible at first glance. But Musk's team wasn't about to give up. They knew they were onto something big, and every new discovery fueled their determination. The first thing they focused on was following the money. That's where scandals often begin and end, with cash changing hands in ways it shouldn't. Musk's team started by examining federal lobbying disclosures. These are public records showing who pays lobbyists to influence government decisions. Normally these filings are straightforward, but in this case there were glaring gaps. Payments from major corporations didn't always match up with what they claimed to be spending. Some amounts were suspiciously high, while others simply disappeared without explanation. Next, they looked at campaign finance reports. Politicians need money to run for office, and most of that comes from donations. But not all donations are clean or transparent. Musk's team noticed patterns linking certain donors to events hosted by the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI. On the surface, these events seemed noble, raising funds for charity, addressing global issues like poverty and education. But when you dug a little deeper, things got murky. For example, some of the biggest donors to CGI events weren't individuals or small nonprofits. They were massive multinational companies with billions in revenue, and many of these companies had ties to authoritarian regimes or controversial industries like weapons manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. Why would such businesses suddenly care so much about charity? Was it really about helping people, or was there another motive? Then came the offshore accounts. This is where things got even stranger. Musk's team discovered that a chunk of the money flowing into CGI wasn't coming directly from these companies. Instead, it was routed through shell companies, businesses that exist only on paper, often set up in tax havens like Panama or the Cayman Islands. These places are infamous for letting wealthy individuals and corporations hide their wealth and avoid taxes. By using shell companies, the true source of the funds became almost impossible to trace. As Musk's investigators followed the trail, they found connections between these shadowy donors and industries heavily reliant on favorable policies from the U.S. government. Defense contractors, for instance, benefit greatly when the government signs lucrative military contracts. Pharmaceutical giants make billions when regulations favor their products over cheaper alternatives. Tech firms thrive when laws protect their patents and data rights. All of these industries stood to gain from having friends in high places. But why Hillary Clinton? After leaving her role as Secretary of State, she remained a powerful figure in American politics. Her speeches, books, and charitable initiatives kept her in the spotlight, and her network of contacts spanned the globe. For corporations looking to sway policy decisions, gaining access to someone like her could be worth millions, or even billions. Musk's team also uncovered internal emails and memos suggesting that some of these donations weren't entirely voluntary. In other words, companies might have felt pressured to contribute, either because they feared losing influence or because they wanted to stay on good terms with influential figures. It was a classic case of quid pro quo. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Of course, none of this was easy to prove. Shell companies don't leave behind smoking guns, and offshore banking laws are designed to keep secrets safe. But Musk's team was persistent. They used advanced software to analyze financial transactions, hired forensic accountants to track down missing links, and reached out to whistleblowers willing to share insider information. As the investigation progressed, Musk began to feel the weight of what he was uncovering. He knew that exposing this kind of corruption wouldn't just ruffle feathers, it could ignite a firestorm. Powerful people would fight back, and the media would scrutinize every move he made. Still, he couldn't ignore the evidence piling up in front of him. Every new piece of the puzzle reinforced his belief that something wasn't right. Meanwhile, whispers of Musk's investigation spread online. Social media buzzed with speculation. Some people praised him for taking on the establishment, while others accused him of playing politics or seeking revenge. Critics argued that Musk, a billionaire himself, wasn't exactly a champion of transparency. Isn't he just trying to settle scores? They asked. Supporters shot back, saying that if anyone could take on the system, it was Musk. Amidst the noise, Musk stayed quiet. He knew that going public too soon could ruin everything. If word got out before he had solid proof, the powerful players involved could cover their tracks, destroy evidence, or discredit him entirely. So he let his team work in secret, gathering as much information as possible before making any moves. By the time they wrapped up their initial findings, Musk's team had compiled a staggering amount of evidence. Bank statements, transaction logs, email chains, and whistleblower testimonies painted a damning picture. It wasn't just about one person or one organization. It was about a system that allowed corruption to thrive unchecked. Yet even with all this evidence, Musk faced a tough decision. Going public meant stepping into a political battlefield where emotions ran high and facts often took a back seat to spin. He'd have to brace himself for attacks from both sides of the aisle. Democrats would likely defend Clinton fiercely, accusing him of bias or ulterior motives. Republicans might try to exploit the situation for their own gain, turning it into a weapon against their rivals. Still, Musk believed the truth mattered more than politics. Corruption, he thought, was a cancer that ate away at trust in institutions. If left unchecked, it could destroy democracy itself. And so, despite the risks, he decided it was time to act. The question now was how to present the evidence in a way that would resonate with ordinary people, the ones who ultimately suffered the most from backroom deals and shady practices. With each passing day, the stakes grew higher. Musk's investigation had gone from a curiosity to a potential bombshell. The world didn't know it yet, but the fallout from what he uncovered would shake the foundations of power in ways no one could predict. Elon Musk knew that timing was everything. After months of digging, analyzing, and piecing together a mountain of evidence, he finally felt ready to share what he had uncovered. But this wasn't just another press release or a casual tweet. It was a moment that could change the course of politics, business, and public trust. Musk decided it was time to break the silence. The event was called Truth Over Power. It was streamed live on X, formerly Twitter, the platform Musk now owned and controlled. He chose this name because he wanted people to focus on accountability, not personalities. For weeks leading up to the announcement, there were whispers online about what Musk might reveal. Some dismissed it as hype, while others speculated wildly about scandals involving powerful figures. By the day of the event, millions tuned in, eager to hear what Musk had to say. When Musk appeared on screen, he looked calm but serious. No flashy graphics, no dramatic music, just him, sitting at a desk with stacks of documents behind him. He started by acknowledging the skepticism surrounding his investigation. "I know many of you think I'm doing this for attention," he said, leaning forward slightly. "But let me be clear, this isn't about me. This is about exposing something that affects all of us." Then he began laying out the evidence. Using simple visuals like charts, timelines, and screenshots, Musk walked viewers through the findings step by step. He explained how money from multinational corporations flowed into events hosted by the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI. On paper, these donations looked like acts of charity, but Musk showed how much of the cash came from shell companies registered in offshore tax havens. These weren't random businesses. They were linked to industries like defense, pharmaceuticals, and tech, all of which stood to benefit from favorable government policies. Musk didn't stop there. He revealed email exchanges between corporate executives discussing their contributions. In one particularly striking example, an executive wrote, "We need to stay in their good graces if we want access down the line." Musk pointed out how vague phrases like access hinted at backdoor deals rather than genuine philanthropy. He also highlighted whistleblower testimonies from former employees who claimed they'd been instructed to mask payments as charitable donations to avoid scrutiny. As Musk spoke, the audience grew quieter. People who had come expecting drama found themselves confronted with hard facts. Charts showed how millions of dollars disappeared without clear explanations. Transaction logs traced the movement of funds from offshore accounts to organizations tied to high-profile political figures. Musk didn't name everyone involved, He focused on patterns and systems, but the implications were undeniable. To drive his point home, Musk played audio clips from interviews with experts in finance and ethics. One professor explained how offshore banking worked, emphasizing how difficult it was to trace money once it entered these hidden networks. Another expert talked about the dangers of allowing corporations to influence policy decisions through unofficial channels. This isn't just unethical, the expert said. It undermines democracy itself. By the end of the presentation, Musk had painted a chilling picture of systemic corruption. He made it clear that this wasn't about attacking one person. It was about shining a light on practices that had gone unchecked for years. If we don't demand transparency, he concluded, we're letting those in power operate in the shadows. And when that happens, ordinary people lose. The reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded with reactions. Supporters praised Musk for taking a stand, calling him a modern-day whistleblower. Critics accused him of cherry-picking evidence or exaggerating the significance of his findings. News outlets scrambled to verify his claims, sparking heated debates across cable TV and online platforms. Hillary Clinton wasted no time responding. In a fiery statement, she denied any wrongdoing and accused Musk of spreading falsehoods. "These allegations are baseless," she said during a press conference. "They're part of a coordinated effort to undermine my work and tarnish my reputation." She insisted that CGI had always operated above board, helping millions of people worldwide through its initiatives. But cracks began to show within her camp. Former allies distanced themselves, citing unanswered questions about funding discrepancies. Journalists who had previously supported Clinton found themselves unable to ignore Musk's evidence. Independent investigations confirmed parts of his exposé, adding credibility to his claims. Meanwhile, Musk faced backlash from both sides of the political spectrum. Democrats accused him of targeting their party leader unfairly, while some Republicans worried his revelations might overshadow their own anti-Clinton rhetoric ahead of upcoming elections. Lobbyists and political operatives launched counterattacks, flooding the internet with conflicting narratives and disinformation campaigns. They tried to portray Musk as reckless, biased, or even unhinged. Despite the pushback, Musk remained steadfast. He encouraged his followers to dig deeper, urging them to look beyond headlines and ask tough questions. "Don't take my word for it," he tweeted after the event. "Do your own research. Hold leaders accountable. That's how change happens." 4 days afterward, the story dominated headlines. Late-night talk shows joked about Musk's presentation, while daytime news programs debated its implications. Protesters gathered outside government buildings, holding signs demanding transparency. Even lawmakers couldn't ignore the growing outcry. Calls for investigations into lobbying practices and campaign financing grew louder, forcing politicians to address issues they'd long ignored. Behind the scenes, Musk braced himself for the fallout. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Powerful people would fight back, lawsuits might follow, and his reputation would likely take a hit. But none of that mattered to him. What mattered was starting a conversation, a real, honest dialogue about corruption and accountability, and start a conversation he did. Whether loved or hated, Musk succeeded in shaking things up. The scandal he exposed became a turning point, forcing Americans to confront uncomfortable truths about money, power, and influence. For better or worse, Musk had thrown open the doors to a world most people never saw, and now there was no closing them again. The aftermath of Elon Musk's explosive presentation rippled across the country like a shockwave. What started as a bold attempt to expose corruption quickly turned into a national firestorm, dividing people and forcing everyone, politicians, corporations, and ordinary citizens, to pick sides. The fallout was messy, chaotic, and unavoidable. Within hours of Musk's live stream, Congress was under immense pressure to act. Lawmakers from both parties scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal while simultaneously trying to control the narrative. Democrats accused Musk of cherry-picking evidence and playing politics, while Republicans seized the opportunity to push their own anti-corruption agenda. But one thing was clear: no one could ignore the growing demand for answers. Congress launched multiple investigations almost immediately. Subpoenas flew left and right, targeting former employees of the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI, corporate executives tied to suspicious donations, and even members of Hillary Clinton's inner circle. For weeks, Capitol Hill buzzed with activity as lawmakers grilled witnesses and sifted through mountains of documents. Some hearings were televised, drawing massive audiences eager to see how deep the rabbit hole went. But resistance came just as fast as the investigations. Powerful lobbyists and political operatives worked tirelessly behind the scenes to discredit Musk's findings. They flooded social media with counter-narratives accusing him of exaggerating the scope of the scandal or manipulating data to fit his agenda. Disinformation campaigns spread like wildfire, sowing confusion among the public. One viral post claimed Musk had fabricated the entire story to boost his own popularity, while another suggested he was secretly working with foreign governments to destabilize American democracy. None of these claims held water, but they didn't need to. They just needed to muddy the waters enough to make people doubt the truth. Musk wasn't blind to what was happening. He knew that exposing corruption would come with consequences, but even he underestimated the scale of the backlash. Critics pounced on every misstep, real or imagined. Journalists scrutinized his past statements, digging up old controversies to paint him as unreliable. Opponents argued that his wealth and influence made him unfit to lead such an investigation, claiming he was using his resources to bully others into submission. Despite the attacks, Musk refused to back down. Leveraging his control over X, formerly Twitter, he encouraged users to share information and ask tough questions. His platform became a battleground where supporters and detractors clashed daily. Hashtags like Tears Truth Over Power and Expose the Corrupt trended for weeks, fueling debates about transparency and accountability. Grassroots movements sprang up overnight, organizing protests outside government buildings and corporate headquarters. Ordinary people who had never cared much about lobbying or campaign finance suddenly found themselves deeply invested in the issue. Yet, not everyone was convinced. Skeptics pointed out gaps in Musk's evidence, arguing that correlation didn't necessarily mean causation. They questioned why he hadn't released certain documents or provided more context for some of his claims. Even some of Musk's own supporters began to wonder if he was biting off more than he could chew. Was this really about exposing corruption, or was it personal? Had Musk let his emotions cloud his judgment? Internally, tensions flared within Musk's investigative team. The stress of working on such a high-stakes project took its toll. Long hours, constant scrutiny, and the looming threat of legal action weighed heavily on everyone involved. Things reached a breaking point when a senior analyst leaked confidential documents to rival outlets. The analyst accused Musk of coercing them into providing false information, claiming the billionaire had selectively omitted exculpatory evidence to bolster his case. The leak was devastating. It gave Musk's critics ammunition to attack his credibility and cast doubt on the integrity of his investigation. Overnight, headlines shifted from praising Musk's bravery to questioning his motives. Is Elon Musk hiding something? One major news outlet asked. Another ran a scathing editorial calling him reckless and irresponsible. For a moment, it seemed like the entire effort might collapse under the weight of criticism. Musk called an emergency meeting with his team, locking himself in a room for hours to strategize. When he emerged, his face was pale but determined. He knew the only way to salvage the investigation was to double down on transparency. If people doubted his intentions, he would give them nothing to hide behind. Musk released a statement addressing the leaked documents, admitting that mistakes had been made but insisting the core findings remained valid. He promised to publish all raw data collected during the investigation, allowing independent experts to verify his conclusions. "I'm not afraid of scrutiny," he said in a follow-up tweet. "If anything, I welcome it. Let the truth speak for itself." His decision to open the investigation to outside review won him some goodwill, but it also exposed vulnerabilities. Independent analysts confirmed parts of Musk's exposé, particularly the links between offshore accounts and CGI funding. However, they also flagged inconsistencies in other areas, suggesting that Musk's team may have rushed certain aspects of their research. These revelations didn't invalidate the overall narrative, but they raised questions about how thorough the investigation truly was. Meanwhile, bipartisan lawmakers introduced sweeping ethics reforms aimed at increasing transparency in lobbying and campaign financing. The proposals included stricter disclosure requirements, limits on foreign contributions, and penalties for companies caught using shell corporations to mask payments. While some hailed these measures as long overdue progress, others dismissed them as performative gestures designed to distract from the scandal itself. Through it all, Musk remained a polarizing figure. To his supporters, he was a hero, a man willing to risk everything to hold powerful people accountable. To his critics, he was reckless, self-serving, and dangerously unpredictable. Love him or hate him, there was no denying that Musk had sparked a national conversation about corruption and accountability. As the dust began to settle, the full impact of Musk's actions became clearer. Corporations implicated in the scandal faced hefty fines and regulatory crackdowns, prompting widespread changes in how businesses interacted with politicians. Grassroots activists continued to push for reform, keeping the pressure on lawmakers to enact meaningful change. And while the scandal tarnished reputations and ended careers, it also inspired a new generation of watchdogs committed to rooting out corruption wherever they found it. For Musk, the experience was transformative. It tested his resolve, stretched his resources, and forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about power and privilege. But it also reinforced his belief that shining a light on wrongdoing was worth the cost. Whether history remembered him as a champion of justice or a reckless provocateur, one thing was certain: Elon Musk had changed the game, and there was no going back. If the first few weeks after Elon Musk's explosive exposé were chaotic, the months that followed turned into a full-blown war. The backlash wasn't just political, it was personal, legal, and relentless. Musk found himself fighting on multiple fronts, against powerful adversaries within his own team, and even in courtrooms across the country. Every victory came at a cost, and every misstep threatened to unravel everything he had worked so hard to uncover. It started with lawsuits. Lots of them. Corporations implicated in the scandal didn't take kindly to being dragged into the spotlight. One by one, they filed defamation cases against Musk, accusing him of damaging their reputations with unfounded allegations. A major defense contractor claimed Musk's investigation had cost them billions in lost contracts. A pharmaceutical giant argued that his accusations had led to boycotts of their products. Even some former employees of the Clinton Global Initiative, CGI, joined the fray, claiming Musk's revelations had ruined their careers. But perhaps the most damaging lawsuit came from an unexpected source: a whistleblower who had initially helped Musk's team gather evidence. This person, once a trusted insider, now accused Musk of coercing them into providing false information. They alleged that Musk had twisted facts to fit his narrative and pressured them to stay silent about inconsistencies in the data. The whistleblower leaked internal communications between Musk's team and themselves, painting a picture of disarray and manipulation. The leaked documents hit like a bomb. Critics pounced, using them to cast doubt on Musk's credibility. "This proves it," one prominent journalist wrote. "Elon Musk isn't exposing corruption, he's manufacturing it." Social media erupted with debates over whether Musk was a hero or a fraud. Supporters defended him fiercely, pointing out that whistleblowers often flip sides when under pressure. But the damage was done. For the first time, cracks began to show in Musk's armor. Amid the chaos, tensions flared within Musk's investigative team. The group had always operated under immense stress, but the leaks and lawsuits pushed them to their breaking point. Long hours, constant scrutiny, and the weight of knowing they were taking on some of the most powerful people in the world wore everyone down. Arguments broke out during meetings, and trust eroded quickly. Some team members questioned whether continuing the investigation was worth the risk. Others felt betrayed by Musk's decision to release raw data without consulting them first. One senior analyst resigned publicly, slamming Musk in a scathing op-ed. "We set out to expose corruption," they wrote, "but somewhere along the way we became part of the problem." Their words stung, not just because they came from someone Musk had trusted, but because they echoed concerns already swirling in the public discourse. Was this investigation still about truth, or had it become something else entirely? Musk handled these betrayals in his usual unpredictable style. On one hand, he lashed out at critics, calling the whistleblower a liar and accusing the analyst of selling out for a payday. On the other hand, he seemed genuinely shaken by the fractures within his team. In private conversations, he admitted feeling overwhelmed. "I thought I was ready for this," he told a close confidant. "But nothing prepares you for the toll it takes." Despite the setbacks, Musk refused to back down. He doubled down on transparency, releasing more documents and inviting independent experts to review his findings. He also leaned heavily on his massive online following, encouraging supporters to fact-check claims and share their own research. His platform became a double-edged sword. It amplified his message, but also made him a bigger target. Trolls flooded his mentions with insults, while conspiracy theorists twisted his words to push their own agendas. Meanwhile, lawmakers continued their investigations, though progress was slow. Powerful lobbyists fought tooth and nail to block subpoenas and delay hearings. Some witnesses invoked their Fifth Amendment rights, refusing to testify. Others simply disappeared, leaving investigators chasing dead ends. It was clear that those implicated in the scandal weren't going down without a fight. Yet amid the resistance, there were glimmers of hope. Independent journalists began connecting dots Musk's team hadn't noticed, uncovering new layers of corruption. A small nonprofit launched a campaign to educate voters about lobbying practices, using Musk's findings as a starting point. Protesters kept pressure on politicians, organizing rallies outside government buildings and corporate headquarters. Slowly but surely, grassroots movements gained momentum, proving that ordinary people could still make noise when they united around a common cause. For Musk, the experience was grueling. Sleepless nights became the norm as he juggled running his businesses, defending himself in court, and managing the fallout from the scandal. Friends noticed changes in him. He seemed thinner, more withdrawn, and less patient than usual. Public's appearances grew rare, and when he did speak, his trademark humor was replaced by a grim determination. Still, he pressed on. Whether driven by conviction or stubbornness, Musk believed the stakes were too high to quit. Corruption, he argued, wasn't just about money, it was about power. And if unchecked, it would continue to erode trust in institutions, widen inequality, and silence dissent. "If I stop now," he told a reporter during a rare interview, "what does that say about the rest of us? That we're okay with living in a system rigged against ordinary people?" By late 2024, the legal battles showed no signs of slowing. Musk faced mounting legal fees, potential penalties, and the very real possibility of losing key cases. Yet, paradoxically, his influence only grew. Love him or hate him, he had forced a national conversation about corruption and accountability. Politicians who had dismissed ethics reform as unnecessary suddenly championed transparency measures. Corporations scrambled to distance themselves from shady practices, fearing they might be next on Musk's list. Behind closed doors, allies urged Musk to step back, warning that the toll on his health and reputation was unsustainable. But stepping back wasn't in his DNA. To him, this wasn't just another chapter in his life, it was a defining moment. Whether history judged him kindly or harshly, one thing was certain. Elon Musk had thrown open the doors to a world most people never saw, and there was no closing them again. As the year drew to a close, the scandal remained unresolved. Investigations dragged on, lawsuits piled up, and public opinion remained divided. But through it all, Musk stood firm, battered but unbowed. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, But he also knew that sometimes shaking things up was the only way to spark real change. By late 2024, the dust began to settle, or at least it seemed that way. The scandal Elon Musk had exposed wasn't just a fleeting headline anymore. It had become part of the national conversation. It lingered in legislative debates, grassroots movements, and dinner table discussions across America. What started as an investigation into questionable financial practices turned into something much bigger, a reckoning with how power worked behind closed doors. For Hillary Clinton, the fallout was undeniable. Though no criminal charges were filed against her, the scandal left scars that wouldn't heal easily. Her reputation, once untouchable, now carried whispers of doubt. Allies who had stood by her for decades distanced themselves, unwilling to be dragged down by association. Plans for any future political comeback, rumored or real, were quietly shelved. Supporters argued she had been unfairly targeted, but the damage was done. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Corporations implicated in the scandal faced consequences too. Some were fined heavily for their roles in funneling money through offshore accounts. Others saw consumer boycotts eat into their profits. Few even went so far as to overhaul their lobbying strategies, promising greater transparency in how they interacted with politicians. These changes weren't born out of goodwill. They were reactions to public pressure. But for ordinary people watching from the sidelines, it felt like progress. Lawmakers, sensing the shifting winds, scrambled to introduce reforms aimed at curbing corruption. Campaign finance laws were tightened, requiring stricter disclosure of donations. Lobbyists faced new restrictions on how they could operate, and penalties for violations became more severe. Bipartisan support for these measures surprised many, though skeptics pointed out that such efforts often amounted to window dressing rather than meaningful change. Still, even symbolic victories mattered. They signaled that the status quo couldn't continue unchecked. As for Musk, the man at the center of it all, the aftermath was bittersweet. He had achieved what he set out to do, expose corruption and spark a nationwide debate about accountability. But the cost was steep. Legal battles drained his resources, both financial and emotional. His relationships suffered under the weight of constant scrutiny. Friends stopped calling, worried about being dragged into the chaos. Family members expressed concern over his health, urging him to step back before he burned himself out completely. Critics still questioned his motives. Was this really about justice, or was it personal ambition wrapped in noble intentions? Some accused him of grandstanding, using the scandal to bolster his own image while deflecting attention from controversies surrounding his businesses. Others dismissed his findings as incomplete or exaggerated, arguing that he had let emotion cloud his judgment. Even supporters admitted that Musk's methods weren't perfect, but perfection wasn't the point. The point was starting a conversation that desperately needed to happen. Despite the criticism, Musk's influence grew. Grassroots activists looked to him as a model for taking on entrenched systems. Journalists praised his willingness to share raw data, allowing others to verify his claims independently. Even opponents grudgingly acknowledged that his exposé had forced issues like lobbying reform onto the national agenda. Love him or hate him, Musk had proven that persistence could break through walls of secrecy. Yet, the experience changed him. Gone was the brash billionaire who thrived on provocation for its own sake. In his place stood a quieter, more reflective figure. Public appearances became rare, and when he did speak, his tone lacked the bravado of old. Instead, he sounded weary but resolute, like someone who had stared into the abyss and come away humbled. "I didn't expect this to consume me," he admitted in a rare interview. "But sometimes doing the right thing means paying a price." Scandal also reshaped how people viewed power and privilege. For decades, corporations and politicians had operated in shadows, shielded by complexity and legal loopholes. Musk's investigation peeled back those layers, revealing a system riddled with cracks. While the revelations were uncomfortable, they sparked a broader movement toward transparency. Citizens demanded answers, not just from leaders, but from each other. Conversations shifted from apathy to action, with communities banding together to hold institutions accountable. Of course, not everyone celebrated this shift. Critics warned that Musk's crusade risked undermining trust in government altogether. If every politician and corporation was guilty until proven innocent, they argued, democracy itself might collapse under the weight of cynicism. Others feared that focusing too much on individual scandals ignored systemic problems that required collective solutions. Musk listened to these concerns but remained steadfast in his belief that sunlight was the best disinfectant. Looking back, the scandal marked a turning point, not just for Musk but for society as a whole. It showed that even the most powerful figures weren't immune to scrutiny. It reminded people that truth, however messy, mattered more than spin. And it proved that one person, armed with determination and evidence, could challenge systems designed to resist change. Musk knew the fight wasn't over. Corruption doesn't vanish overnight, and those who benefit from it rarely surrender willingly. But he also knew that exposing wrongdoing was only the first step. Real change required sustained effort, not just from individuals, but from entire communities. As he stepped back from the spotlight, he encouraged others to pick up where he left off. "This isn't about me," he said during a final address on X. "It's about us. About demanding better, from our leaders, from our institutions, and from ourselves." As 2024 drew to a close, the legacy of Musk's investigation remained uncertain. Would it inspire lasting reforms, or would it fade into history as another chapter in America's ongoing struggle with corruption? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear. By shining a light on the shadows, Musk had ignited a spark that refused to dim. Whether hero or villain, provocateur or pioneer, he had shown that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, has the power to reshape the world.